The River Lee navigation emerges into the Thames at Bow Creek, just east of that huge serpentine of the Thames that forms the Isle of Dogs. It carves a green corridor due north through some of the most heavily industrialised areas of north-east London, passing under the M25 at Enfield and continuing on to Hertford. The River Stort joins the Lee at Hoddesdon, and it makes its way north-east through Harlow to run parallel to the M11 up to Bishop Stortford. The first Navigation Act on the Lee was passed in 1424, the first for any navigation in Britain. The shape of the Lee navigation as we know it today was formed in 1766 by that great canal engineer John Smeaton. By the 1860s it had become virtually an open sewer, and the Lee Conservancy was formed to correct this national disgrace. Fortunately for all of us, they proved to be extremely successful. 100 years on from that, in the 1960s, the Lee Valley Regional Park was formed, of which more later. Our journey began one brilliant May morning in the newly revitalised Limehouse Basin, and we could easily have imagined ourselves to be in Saint-Tropez, among the rat-tat-tatting of the halyards on a myriad hollow metal masts. What a tremendous success story this is. Formerly one of the most run-down areas of the East End, it's now surrounded by highly desirable properties, each commanding six-figure sums for a view of us and our fellow boaters. Quite an awesome responsibility, really, when you put it like that. Dockers and stevedores have been replaced by smart young businessmen and women off to work in the city. The hexagonal lockkeeper's office houses showers and washing machines for moorers, many of whom are permanently resident here. The lock, with its unusual vertical radial gates, issues onto the Thames Tideway. Access is restricted by the tide. The pretty Wren Church, which once dominated the landscape, is now all but hidden behind the residential towers. The Regent's Canal enters via Commercial Road Lock, and details of this are in Videoactive's programme The London Ring. Tucked away in the far corner of the basin is the hard-to-find exit to Limehouse Cut. In the late 1960s, this short new connection was made between the basin and the cut, which used to exit via a separate lock onto the Thames. Limehouse Cut runs through one of the toughest and most underprivileged areas of the city, with plenty of signs of alcohol and drug abuse on the towpath. Mooring here is definitely not recommended. The cut is semi-tidal. During a spring tide, the towpath disappears underwater for short periods. These strange-looking cylindrical objects are roosts for herons. The Pride of Lee is a trip boat with restaurant and licensed bar operated by the Lower Lee Project to provide access to London's East End canals and the Lower River Lee. This semi-tidal section suffers from a continuous build-up of silt, which has to be dredged out at regular intervals. Bow locks provide direct access to the Thames via the tortuous and uncertain channels through Bow Creek. Passage is only possible by prior arrangement with the lockkeeper and is not advisable for unaccompanied inland craft. Just above Bow Locks, our river landscape is transformed by the amazing Three Mills Island. There have been tide mills here since Saxon times. Today, there are only two surviving mills. The third, a windmill, existed until the mid-19th century. Simon Lee of the Lower Lee Project gave us a brief insight into their history.
This is Three Mills Island on the tidal part of the River Lee in East London.